So I'd like to welcome you all. My name is Mirka. We are broadcasting these Lead Montessori community conversations from Prague, Czech Republic. And together with me today are the co-founders of Lead Montessori, Kathy Minardi, Peter Davidson, and Sue Pritzker. And we have a wonderful guest, John McNamara. And if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, we promised that we would dedicate one of the Lead Montessori conversations a month to the adolescent theme. So this is our second gathering on the adolescent work. We are keeping up with our promise, and we'll do this every month, one time, always. There's going to be an adolescent topic for the Lead Montessori community conversations. So we'll keep you informed on the Lead Montessori website. And we're really excited to see people like Jenny and many of you who are adolescent practitioners. And we're really hoping that it's going to, these conversations are going to help us support the worldwide adolescent community in their work. So that's why we're doing it. And I'm going to stop speaking now and give word to John. John, please take the word now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mirka, and thank you very much for inviting me. I believe, just as I do with my students, I will probably leave you with many more questions and very few answers. But I first want to go over what led me to what I'm saying today. And when the first week after the governor of Ohio said the schools had to be closed, I had many conversations with parents, and the parents were mostly concerned about academics. However, in all my conversations with my students, they felt what was missing. And the quote one, she said, "Mac, it's not your math lessons we're missing, but it's engagement with each other." And this is going to be the main part of my speech. So the students talked about community relationships. We had just received 40 tomato seeds that were on the International Space Station for 6 months, and then 40 seeds that were not. And that was going to be part of our spring planting. And the students were really excited about getting in, getting the spring garden, getting everything done, our roughing baseball playoffs, our musical, our trip to Colonial Williamsburg. When I talked to the students, they seldom mentioned academics, but parents mentioned academics. Second thing that's really influencing me today and what I'm doing with my students, I have been fortunate to spend 4 summers with Jenny with her adolescent orientation in Sweden. In fact, this summer I had been planning to bring my granddaughter Helen with me. But being at that orientation and observing her students preparing meals every day, the community, the social gathering, how they operated, that influences me so much. And when I come back every summer from Sweden, it's not how can I build a better, do a better math lesson or do a better science. It's more how can I build with community, how can I engage more with the hands. Also influenced me today, I mentioned my granddaughter, Helen, who's 14 years old, is a student in my classroom. And after I convinced my daughter that even though the governor said grandchildren are not supposed to be going anywhere near their grandparents, she realized it was a lost cause, and Helen and I have spent a lot of time together. So much what I'm saying today, I've learned from her and her friends. About 2 weeks ago, Helen called me and said, "Grandpa, it's Isla's birthday tomorrow. Could we organize a car caravan and drive by her house and wish her a happy birthday? And I said, yes. Well, when we got to her house, of course, the cars stopped. Some of the girls had masks on, some did not. Within 5 minutes, everybody was out of their car, engaging, and they must have spent an hour and a half just standing, talking to each other about nothing. They just had to have these conversations. They had been isolated from each other for 3 weeks at that time. Another thing, last Saturday, Elizabeth, who graduated from Ruffing in 1993 and lives in Chicago, was back in Cleveland for the weekend for a family visit and came by to see the school. And when we were talking, she asked me, how am I coping? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, everything we did at Ruffing was with the group. She said, we learned more from each other than from you. That all you did was walk around, make suggestions, and guide us, but we did all the work, we did all the learning. How is that happening now? So my first recommendation, the governor on March 12th, which was a Thursday, said schools were going to be closed effective Monday, March 16th. So I spent the weekend before I went back to the source. I decided if this is going to work, I have to read Montessori. So I completely reread From Childhood to Adolescent, Montessori, A Social Newborn, the physical and psychological development of the adolescent, etc., to help guide me. So I'm going to just quickly read 4 quotes that have guided me in what I have been doing with the students since then. And these 4 quotes are from childhood to adolescence. Montessori sees adolescence as a sensitive period for social relationships, the age at which the child must make a place for himself with his peers and at which he begins to consider the social realities of the wider community. Another quote, to consider the school as the place where instruction is given is one point of view. But to consider the school as a preparation for life is another. In the latter case, the school must satisfy all the needs of life. Now, this really impacted me because there's been too much influence since school is closed to consider school as a place where instruction is given. And that's secondary. The third, the role of education is to interest the child profoundly in an external activity to which he will give all his potential. We are concerned here with bringing him liberty and independence while interesting him in an activity through which he will subsequently discover reality. And for him, this is the means by which he may free himself from the adult. In the last quote I'm going to read, moral care here refers to the relation between the children, the teachers, and the environment. The teachers must have the greatest respect for the young personality, realizing that in the soul of the adolescent, great values are hidden, and that in the minds of these boys and girls, there lies all our hope of future progress and the judgment of ourselves and our times. The intimate vocation of man is the secret of the adolescent. Now, I read these quotes because I do feel once schools went to distance learning, and that's certainly been an issue that I've been trying to deal with at Ruffing, is we can't just focus on the academic and on technology in general, but now in particular, too much of the focus of technology in education has been on adding more and more technology. However, more time and thought has to be given to the other side of the equation. How technology can aid in the child's total development is a question we must ask. And this question has become more important now than ever before. How we use technology is more important than the technology itself. As Montessorians, we must start from the child and consider his or her characteristics and needs at each stage of development. I discovered very early on when I was trying to do Zoom lessons in that all of a sudden, if I had to break my 3-period lesson into 3 parts, maybe the first period was 10% and the third period was 10% and the second period was 80%. All of a sudden, with these Zoom meetings, that first period was getting longer and longer. So I'm thinking, where is this active role of the student? So right now, it appears to be all about technology and the mechanics of how to teach remotely. However, what I feel is missing and what I've been trying to work on is the importance of social and emotional learning, the value of belonging. We can't let that be lost. The strong relationships, the strong community, the better, more engaged students. And then the maintaining of relationships, it's not an afterthought. You know, online by definition means more screen time. So I'm trying to dichotomize and break into 2 and breaking into vintage versus digital. And by vintage, whether it's old-fashioned, it's the kind of hands-on learning that actually requires your hands. So that's my whole emphasis now, is vintage learning, not digital. Thinking of online, when we think of online teaching, too often we tend to imagine a student sitting at a computer completing work. However, maybe some of the best tools are low-tech, and I call LoFi versus Wi-Fi. That is what I'm doing now. We have to increase the vintage approach and the vintage innovation approach instead of digital innovation. Home learning doesn't have to require us to send schoolwork home. It's more about building a partnership between school and home and recognizing the ways that students might learn within their environment. And when we're talking about now the students at home, you can't convert it. Learning isn't like taking a PDF file and converting it to a Google document. We can't simply substitute new tools and do the exact same activity. That spontaneous seminar won't work through a video conferencing system. That I mentioned earlier, that 3-period lesson does not work. One of the things that has been most frustrating for my students and me is, whether you call it a seminar, puzzle discussions, is the discussing, the sharing of ideas, learning from each other, arguing, bickering, which works best, which does not. This is really missing that amazing collaborative design challenge that is part of an adolescent community. Doesn't transfer easily into a non-school environment. So again, I use, and when I'm working, the vintage tools versus digital tools. And even when I think about it, when I prepare lessons over time, that I tend to have a flow chart that I ask myself before a lesson, am I sure this will work? If the answer to that is yes, then I'm just preserving the status quo, which is important. But if am I sure this will work? And the answer is no, that's what leads to innovation. So now with this situation, am I sure this will work? There's many more no's than yeses. So there's got to be much more innovation, but the innovation has to be vintage. In the past, before COVID-19, probably I would think about it that when I'm planning things, I'm trying to do what you might call in regular education, best practices. Well, now that no longer exists. Now we have to move into what I'm calling next practices. And this innovation has to be about better and different, not necessarily flashy and new. I really believe now that we've had to move out, we really have to borrow ideas from the past. As I said earlier, we have to go LoFi, not Wi-Fi. Old school materials matter more so. Maybe the students have to do more journaling. What a student did, because they're doing more screen time, what a school did, what students did with word processing, what students did with a PowerPoint, maybe they have to now do it with poster, pencil, paper to get away from the technology, to get them back to using their hands. The role of education, and going back to quote Montessori, is to interest a child profoundly in an external activity to which he will give his full potential. Now, could you play that YouTube clip?
Celebration, I finally figured out, yeah, that all our dreams have no limitations. That's what it's all about. Come on now. Everyone is special in their own way. We make each other strong. We're not the same, we're different in a good way. Together's where we belong. Okay, and just for your information, the girl third from the left in a white Ruffing Montessori sweatshirt was my granddaughter, Helen. Now,
when I talk about role of education is to interest a child profoundly in an external activity to which he will give his full potential. I'm not sure the number of students decided to do this since we could not do our high school musical. Now, whether they will add more songs to it, put more together, make it more polished. But this is what I'm talking about. This was a student-initiated student thing. They have to do it. My granddaughter, Helen, is an accomplished trumpet player. However, over this, being at home, she and a group of students, we were on a Zoom discussion one day, and they decided, why don't we all learn new musical instruments? So Helen is now teaching herself the guitar and the piano. Another girl is trying to teach herself the violin, but she doesn't even know what a bow is. The parent community got together. We've done Adopt a Family that just to keep community together, different families will go to other families' homes and decorate their yard and do different things to try and preserve that we are community. For our graduation, all the students are doing their graduation speeches and are going to tape them. We're going to have it in a big parking lot. We rented a screen. The students are going to present their speeches. So we're going to go ahead and do our graduation, do our celebration. I mentioned these tomato seeds. The students are really excited about. Since they can't be here, we're taking pictures every day of the growth of the seeds. And it's fascinating, our discussions of which ones were on the International Space Station and which ones were not. And there is a difference. We don't know which seeds are which, but it is a fascinating activity that pulls people together, and it's LoFi. It's not at all Wi-Fi. I might add, when this first started, the parents, the other teachers, and I, we used the words, this is a crisis, this is an emergency. The students have talked about it, that this is an adventure. And my job is to make it a Montessori adventure. And if you are anything like me, you are thinking a lot about what happens next. I'm worried, but I'm also hopeful. I'm anxious, but I'm also curious. I'm optimistic, but also trying to be realistic. However, I really believe that the community that we have built together really is the foundation that shapes what is going to be possible for us now. And everything we do going forward has to be based on this community that we have developed. The students, when I talk about the projects they come up with, students all have diverse interests. Common theme, the creative work is a lifeline for the students. And the role of education then is to interest a child profoundly in an external activity to which he will give all his potential. Mario Montessori and Camillo Grazzini have tremendous quotes on this importance of this creative imagination. So they're doing these projects. My job now is not to give lessons, but how can I integrate the so-called academics into these projects they're doing rather than start with the academic. And it's not easy. It's going to be very difficult to continue. But just one interesting thing on community, tonight, the students that graduated from Ruffing from 1978 to 1982 now, so these students are, to call them students now, they're all in their 50s, older than much of you. We are having a Zoom virtual reunion tonight, that this is community from 1980 is still today. I want to conclude, and I've used this now with a big letter I'm writing to all our parents in the school to prepare them for the summer and going forward. But Mirka said this at the end of her interview with Sue. And to me, it's very profound. And a number of our parents have commented likewise. Together with our families, we are able to overcome this situation and come out on the other side stronger and more experienced and maybe transformed in a way which will be very beautiful. And I'd like to conclude with that because I think that's what we all have to do. Thank you.